Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Rules of Engagement. As always, I'll be your host, Nick axslav ranish. Today, we're going to talk about the Creator vs. Nestea series that you saw yesterday on this same channel at 5 p.m. Eastern. We're going to go over the 3 games of that series. We're going to start with Game 1, which, of course, was on, on one of the maps. It was on Star Station. Game 2 on Whirlwind. Game 3 on Neo Planet S. And then at the end, it's going to be the viewer Q&A. So submit any questions about anything to me at axslav. Just go ahead, get on Twitter, tweet me a quick message, and I'll answer it at the end of this show. So let's start off on game number 1 on Star Station. A couple of things I want to point out in this game are first, the importance of scouting. And then emergency defense reactions. Things you have to do if you're like, oh crap, I need to get a lot of defense right now. What it should be your emergency knee-jerk reactions to get that defense up. And then talk a little about how Protoss micro and how it changes depending on the situation at hand. So let's jump in this game and talk about the importance of scouting. So we can see here it's the 8-minute mark. Nestea has no idea what's going on in Creator space. Now, it may be, I mean, most Zerg scout earlier, but maybe if you're Nestea and you're a god, it might be okay to wait until Overseer to scout, right? I'm okay with that. But if you're going to wait until Overseer to scout, you better be darn sure that you start that Overseer the instant that layer finishes, right? So you have to be sitting there. The instant that layer finishes, it's at, 70, 78, 78, 80. Right now, this Overlord better be trained to an Overseer, because if you're going to delay your scouting that much, every single second counts. And the longer you wait, the more information you lose here. I mean, every single second that passes means a second less you have to react to a push or an expansion or a certain tech pattern. And a couple seconds could mean losing a billion drones to an Oracle. It could mean losing 2 billion drones to DTs or whatever it is, right? You could lose a lot of things in just a few seconds in Starcraft 2. It's such a dynamic game. So waiting half a minute to get that Overseer is not something you can afford to do if it's your first way of scouting your opponent. It's very, very important to get in there as soon as possible. Now let's back this up just a hair as I'm talking about that. And we're going to talk about kind of knee-jerk reactions. So if you're scouting late, you don't know what your opponent's doing, all of a sudden this is what you see on your map. You see a bunch of sentries and zealots coming out, and there's this many, there's probably a bunch of warp gates behind him. Oracles too. If he's going Oracles and there's this many sentries, there's obviously no other tech. This is the entire gas expense of Creator Prime. So if all this is coming out at you, right, you know he's going for timing with a lot of gateways and these Oracles, right? So what should he do? You should get back to your base. This is where you need to get those emergency defense reactions as a Zerg player, right? You can tell they're very sentry heavy. If they're very sentry heavy, what you want to do is you want to get units that are very good against sentries. Well, force fields are good against Zerglings, Roaches, and Hydralisk. What else can you make? You can make spine crawlers. I'll call them units so they can move around, so they're basically units. There is 0 supply units that are pretty good. But you should really focus on spine crawlers. You can put as much money as you want into them immediately, because as long as you have drones and money, you can make them. You don't have to worry about larva production. They've got 7 range. They can't be force fielded. They've got a lot of life, good damage. They're the ideal unit for defending any type of gateway-focused timing attack. So right here, if I am Nestea, what I would want to be doing is I'd want to be canceling this 4th hatchery. Using that money, you have 500 minerals. Go ahead and build 5 spines across here. In fact, I would like to do that, 12 seconds ago, the 9-minute mark. The instant I'm a Zerg player, right, and I see these guys coming in, and especially as soon as I see these Oracles right here at 9:05, I'm jumping back to my base. 9:06, 9:07, I'm canceling this hatchery. By 9:10, 9:12, I've got 5 spines about to be started up right in that area. So really want to prioritize getting those spine cores up. Getting Roaches and Hydras isn't bad, right? I mean, he's getting all these Roaches and Hydras. We can see them up there in the production tab. He's trying to react in a way to defend his attack. But what's important to note is that the Roaches and Hydras, some of them will be made natural. Once they're made, they still have to walk all the way to the front. And then by the time they get there, the battle might be over. They can be cut off by force fields, etc. So you'd much rather just build the spine crawlers. They'll get where you need them faster. And at the same time, they won't have to be worried about being force fielded. So the last thing I'm going to talk about in this replay here is about the Protoss micro and how to prioritize that micro. So I'll back it up a couple notches here. And against the composition the Zerg player has right here, when you're looking at this type of composition, You see they have a bunch of queens here. We're going to look at this through Creator Prime's viewpoint. You can see they have a bunch of queens here. And the oracles aren't going to be of immense value, right? But what's really important here is the force fields. You're talking about Protoss Micro, it always comes down to force fields, right? So let me bring up the little overlay thing here. And what's cool about force fields, basically, is depending on every situation, you want to use those force fields differently, right? So if your opponent has got a ton of roaches, you split them in half. You've seen that with a 2-base immortal push. If they have a big army, split in half. If they have a small army like this, right? Just a few roaches, mostly drones, a few hydras. If your army is much bigger than your opponent's, right? And you want to find a way to deal with them, what you got to do is you got to think, okay, I can crush what he has now, but he might have a lot of production. His army's still trying to be mustered up. He's mustering up this large army. What I need to do now is make sure these units can't retreat so I can kill these off. Then by the time other units rally in, I can focus on them. Just want to kill off as much as possible, as fast as possible. So in this situation, when you use force fields and time warp, not to cut them in half or to keep them away from your army, but to prevent them from retreating. So right here, the force field should go like something like this, right? This is the ideal force field. Not like this. If you do force fields like this, right? This front row, no, don't do anything there. Because what happens then is he retreats the queens behind the force fields, and then it delays the battle. The longer the battle is delayed, the more units will be mustered up. But right now, you've got the advantage. You're going to press it and deny any retreat. So if he jump over to the... Jump over to see what happens. That's exactly what he does. Unfortunately, he misses a couple of these. You know, he missed a couple queens, but he got the majority of the roaches, which is the important part. He got almost all the roaches. They couldn't retreat. And then, of course, you see his second force fields. He tries to make sure these queens can't retreat either. And there's no Zerg army retreating. As these hydras come in one by one, they get summarily executed by the mass firing range of all those stalkers. So one by one, the hydras fall down easily. You just got to make sure the roaches can't retreat, so you get rid of those first. Wraps up game number 1. We'll take a short break and be on to analyzing game number 2.